Alright guys, Hayzink here, welcome back to the channel for another Street Fighter Duel video. So we're back talking about VIPER again. We actually have had a small update in relation to the VIPER situation. I'm going to go over that update, go over something else that I've heard in relation to the VIPER situation, and actually there needs to be some follow-on from this as well that I'm going to need to do in this video, which is going to involve having to basically update the tier list. So I'm not doing a full tier list video, I'm not doing that. Going to have to wait a wee while, but I am going to have to make changes just so that you guys don't have the wrong impression of certain things, because VIPER being the way she is now doesn't just affect VIPER, okay? So we're going to look at the notice first of all, talk about that and talk about what I've heard's coming, but we'll see. So it was posted by Skeleton. You can see here, hello Street Fighter Duel community, thank you for your feedback regarding the recent changes to the legendary unit Agent C VIPER. Post-release, it was discovered that the character had a bug causing her to not work as intended. Due to these circumstances, we issued a fix that removed this bug from the character in-game. We understand that these changes impacted users in a myriad of ways and sincerely apologise for the frustration this may have caused. Thanks for your feedback and for playing Street Fighter Duel at everyone. Right, obviously you can see here that the responses to this, because the only way you can respond is by basically posting emotes. You can see that they're pretty much all bad. They're all bad responses. People aren't really happy about this. Now, first of all, I just want to say I wouldn't give Skeleton a hard time for this. Skeleton can only really communicate what he can communicate. I know this from speaking to Dino in the past, where there comes a point where their hands are tied. They can only really talk about what they're allowed to talk about in that moment, right? And you'll notice here that Skeleton doesn't mention anything about compensation or anything like that. So people are obviously immediately jumping to the conclusion that we're not going to get any kind of compensation or anything relating to this issue. Now, what I've heard from a source who I won't reveal, it's not Skeleton, but I have heard from a source that they are talking about some kind of compensation. It's just what and how. So there could still be something coming. There's no guarantees on that though, but it is still being looked at and it is still being discussed. So all hope is not lost there. However, what I will say is it looks like all hope is lost of VIPER being returned to any form of glory, shall we call it, okay? Now, I just think it's important here, and I'm saying this in the hope that maybe Skeleton sees this video, because I'm actually going to share it directly with Skeleton, because again, in the least offensive way possible, he's a link in the chain. You know, he ultimately can't make the decision. If he could make the decision, he would probably make the right decision, but it got to go above him, then it's probably got to go above that person as well, right, to get the decision made. So when it comes down to calculating compensation, I actually really don't know how they can do that in a fair way. Now, allow me to elaborate on this somewhat, okay? VIPER in herself isn't isolated, okay? So, what I mean is, first of all, you purchased VIPER, you've spent your £50, $50, 69 euros, whatever it costs, right? You've got that unit, right? Based on the fact that you were able to try her in a trial and she worked a certain way. So you were able to, like, physically yourself, hands-on, using her in a trial, you were able to see her working in a certain way. And you purchased that unit based on your trial, right? Now, anywhere else in the world, anywhere, if you were to trial a product and then the product that you purchased was different, you would be entitled to your money back. Like, I'm not splitting hairs and saying that. That is just how things work. It's essentially classed as false advertising, right? Even if it was a mistake, it's still false advertising. The company, if they did something along those lines where they inadvertently showed you something that did A and then they sold you something that did B, if they were like exposed for that, or if they found out themselves, they would either have to do like a product recall, offer you a discount, offer you a refund, whatever. There would be some recompense to you as a customer. You wouldn't be expected to just suck it up and go along, okay? So the issue I see here is, how do you deal with compensation, right? Because let's say, for example, they decide, okay, we will just give them in-game currency to that value, okay? to me that doesn't even work, because the issue you've got is when it comes to players, they spent a certain amount of money to buy this certain character, okay? If they went to the shop and they could have spent that same amount of money and got 25 tickets, that might not have been appealing to them, so they wouldn't have made that purchase, okay? So compensating doesn't really resolve the issue, unfortunately. And what I was saying about how the issue with VIPER is a little bit more nuanced and a little bit layered is, look at Pharaoh Sagat, for example, right? Pharaoh Sagat was essentially more or less unusable as a unit, okay? Being able to do this with VIPER, Pharaoh Sagat became a usable unit, okay? And using myself as an example, because VIPER enabled Pharaoh Sagat to become a usable unit, I spent 300 tickets to get Pharaoh Sagat up to a level where I could make videos and show you guys, look, this is what you can do, blah, blah, blah. And I also spent, what, about 250 to 300 stone boxy things, don't know how many it takes, but I spent all those boxes to get him up to Fighting Spirit 30, okay? I would not have done that if not for VIPER. I can categorically tell you I would not have put any investment into that character, I would not have summoned for that character, and I would not have used those soul stones on that character if it was not for VIPER, okay? Now, I'm probably not the only one. So how do you compensate something like that? If you solely compensate for the issue with VIPER, you're disregarding anyone else who potentially built characters that VIPER enabled, okay? She did enable other characters, although I would say that Pharaoh Sagat was the only character that she took from being absolutely useless, like absolutely useless, to somewhat usable. Other characters like Sagat and stuff, she obviously made better, but you would probably have built Sagat anyway. But a unit like Pharaoh Sagat, I mean, I did it. You could totally take a character you had zero interest in, zero desire to summon for. You could have spent all your summoning tickets and all your currency, whatever, to build that unit up as a result of this broken unit. So when you address compensation, you have to really look at the full picture. You can't solely compensate based on that one character, because that one character led to other decisions being made by players within the game. So this is I mean, it's great that Skeleton's got in front of this, right? Skeleton, he's probably going to take a lot of stick for this, and I think that's a bit unfortunate, because I know from these guys doing these jobs, if they could say more, they would say more, okay? I very much feels a bit like don't shoot the messenger kind of situation. I'm going to say that as it stands right now, I'm not happy with the outcome. And if compensation just ends up being some arbitrary amount, it's not going to resolve the issue, because even if it was accidental, false selling is still false selling. That's just what it is. It's misrepresentation, and that is what happened with VIPER. Honestly, the easiest solution, in my opinion, would just have been to revert. Chalk it up to, okay, this is not what we wanted her to do, but we'll just reword her kit, and that's what she'll do. That would have caused less headache than what they've now got in front of them, okay? The game's been doing really good things in this celebration. It's really unfortunate that this is here to taint it somewhat, but how they handle the fallout from this is quite important, because I know already, just from my guild, just from posts on Discord, just from posts I've seen on Reddit and other social medias and my comment sections, this potentially has enough of an impact to make people who did have spent money in this game no longer do so. So I do feel like how they tackle this is going to be very important, okay? Now, we basically now know they do not have, at this current time, an intention to revert VIPER back to normal. So how does that impact things? Well, on my most recent tier list, I actually had to include VIPER, and unfortunately, honestly, the way that VIPER is just now, people might think this is me being quite hyperbolic, but it's really not. I am actually going to put her in the B tier, right? And I'll explain why. basically with Viper just now, if you can't kill someone within the first 2 rounds, you're dead in the water. She's useless for bosses. In stages, again, unless you can somehow manage to clear those stages within the first 2 rounds, you are just basically looking at being a sitting duck in the battle, right? And when it comes to PvP, that means that she's got no use whatsoever. And when it comes to bossing, she's useless. Honestly, she literally went from treasure to trash with what they've done. Okay, it is probably one of the biggest falls from grace I've ever seen. Although the next one could actually be worse. She quite literally made this unit go from below here all the way up to here because she did enable him to actually be used on a team. Back to the way that she is, he is relegated all the way back down. I'm not going to take him off the tier list anymore, put him down here, but he's like bottom tier trash again. So again, if you are a person who has potentially decided, you know what, I'm going to put some investment into that character now because that character can be used, then all of your investment, all of your stones, all of your tickets, everything that you did to get that character, build that character, make that character better, have now been wasted. And honestly, it's really unfortunate. It's because of one unit. I mean, honestly, if I spent a little bit more time going through here, there's some other characters that have maybe slightly dropped off because they don't have the advantage of being able to fire off their C3 as constantly. But the only 2 that really stand out to me just now is obviously Viper, who's had the issue to begin with, and Sagat, who she, I want to say, impacted the most, literally taking him from bottom tier nonsense up to an actual usable unit. It's very unfortunate. It is very unfortunate. Now, I'm not doing a tier list update here. I'm not going to be putting the turtles and stuff onto this list. That will come later. I like to wait until there's a good few characters to add, but I didn't want my last tier list video to sit there and basically show this unit being a high ranking unit while she was still on sale, because people would make decisions based on that. Same as Sagat, people would use their things like their top pick boxes and stuff to build this character up, and honestly, it is just not worth the time doing that now. They've ruined that character. Well, that character was already bad, but they've ruined the usability of that character. It was given second life by Viper, and they've absolutely ruined Viper. Like, absolutely. I mean, honestly, if Viper performed this way day 1, she wouldn't have sold. She wouldn't have sold. There's no way she would have sold. You would have had people buying her who buy everything, but to people who actually make savvy purchases, who only purchase things that will help them, they would not have bought Viper. And those people are now stuck with this character, and to be honest, that can be quite crushing to their confidence to make future purchases within the game. And again, I always say that when it comes to a company, I don't judge a company on the mistakes that they make. I never have. I judge a company on how they deal with their mistakes, because at the end of the day, every company, every business, every person can make a mistake. If you can put things right, I think that shows more about you as a person or as a company than you being judged for making that mistake in the first instance. So that's what I always say. Again, I've had issues in the past with companies who have messed up big time, and they've really impressed me with how they've resolved the issue. Okay, now don't get me wrong, if they keep making issues it becomes a problem, right? But if they are happy to hold their hands up, okay, we made a mistake, it's on us, we're going to make this right for you, then as a customer, I'm like, you know what? I will keep supporting you, because that's what I like to see. I like to see companies who treat their customers with the level of respect that they have earned, right? And at the end of the day, that's what we are. We're customers. We're not players. Well, we are players, right? But we're customers. We literally pay these guys wages, because if we did not play these games, free-to-play players promoting the game by word of mouth, spenders spending, it wouldn't be putting food on the table of these developers. And honestly, I really hope while they're doing the negotiating or whatever it is they're doing to figure out if and what they're going to do to compensate players for this, I really hope they take everything into account, because again, I actually think this is a bigger issue than they realise. But we'll see. We'll see. The problem is, as with most issues, a lot of times communities go quiet on them, and if people go quiet on them, they think it's not a big deal. It's happened before in this game. I've highlighted things in the past, people were upset for a day or two, and then they never mentioned it again, and I would be talking about it and people would say, oh, it's no big deal, move on. But then the next thing would happen, and it all comes from not dealing with that first thing. I've always said this, and I'll say it again, if you keep letting businesses, people, companies away with things, then they think to themselves, well, we were able to do that this time, so if we do that next time, nobody's going to care. That's not the way to be. So as players, without going in on Skeleton, because I do not think you should go in on Skeleton, it's not his fault. If you do not feel like you are going to get a sense of satisfaction, or when we see whatever the compensation is, if it doesn't meet what your expectations are, or if you have expectations now, drop them in the comments of what you think they should be. Now, I have an overwhelming suspicion that most of you will probably say full refund. Okay? The problem with that is, I don't actually think they can do it, right? If you're on iOS, they cannot do it, because they do not have access to Apple's refund system. They don't. And I know that for a fact, okay? And even if they say to you, okay, you can refund, contact Apple. Even if you literally have an email right there from the developer saying, we, Topjoy, the developer, hereby authorise you, Apple, to refund this customer, Apple will still refuse to refund you. That's just how they operate. Google, that's a different story. I believe the developers do have access to the back end of Google and they could initiate a refund. So, again, that's a whole other situation. What are they going to do? Refund half the player base and not the other half? I just don't know how they deal with this. But they've acknowledged it. They've acknowledged it's a problem, which is them essentially taking responsibility, admitting they've done wrong. So now we just need to wait and see how they handle it. So drop a comment down below. If your solution is refund, bearing in mind what I've just said there, that honestly, I genuinely do not think it's possible for them to refund on iOS. What would your alternative be? Like, what would your alternative solution be? I'll tell you now, my solution, and the easiest solution, revert back, make her debuff cleansable. Not necessarily free from the tag slot, that's a whole different thing, I mentioned that before, but at least allow units like Summer Elena and Diviner Rose to clear off that debuff. She wouldn't be as good as she was, but she would be a damn sight better than she is just now. So that would be my solution. I think that would be the easiest, most hassle-free solution. You can let me know. Drop a comment down below, and any feedback on here, I'm going to be sharing it directly to Skeleton. Hopefully they can use that to show the dev team, well look, here's what's happening with the players. Anyway, I've been Hayzink. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one. Peace.